Taylor Green strutted down the hallway of Westlake High like he owned the place. In many ways, he felt like he did. His father's company logo was plastered on the new scoreboard in the gym, and the science wing bore his family name on a shiny plaque by the entrance. Money talked at Westlake, and the Green family had plenty to say. "Hey, watch it!" Taylor snapped at a freshman who accidentally bumped into him. The younger boy mumbled an apology and scurried away, books clutched tightly to his chest. Taylor's friends snickered behind him. "These kids need to learn some respect," Taylor said loudly, making sure everyone in the hallway could hear him. He adjusted his expensive leather jacket, a birthday gift that cost more than most students' entire wardrobes. Taylor hadn't always been this way. Back in middle school, he was just another kid trying to fit in. But things changed when he grew 6 inches over one summer and discovered he could throw a football with remarkable accuracy. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be his friend. Teachers smiled at him in the hallway. The principal knew him by name. And his father, normally distant and critical, finally seemed proud. Power changes people, and Taylor had been drunk on it for 2 years now. "Did you see Coach's face when you showed up late to practice yesterday?" asked Robbie, Taylor's right-hand man since freshman year. He didn't say a word. "What's he gonna do?" Taylor laughed. "Bench me before the championship." My old man would have his job the next day. The truth was, Coach Williams had tried to discipline Taylor last season. After Taylor bullied a water boy until the kid quit, Coach benched him for a game. That evening, Taylor's father made a call to the school board. By morning, Coach was apologizing to Taylor instead. The lesson wasn't lost on Taylor. Consequences were for other people. As lunch period began, Taylor and his crew claimed their usual table, the good one in the center of the cafeteria where everyone could see them, and more importantly, they could see everyone. "Check it out," Taylor nodded toward a table in the corner where a group of art club kids were eating. Bet they spent all weekend drawing pictures and playing with glitter. His friends laughed on cue. "That guy in the blue sweater? He asked me for help with his math homework yesterday," said Robbie, like I'd be caught dead talking to him. Taylor's eyes narrowed. Maybe we should help him out, give him a real education. But before Taylor could elaborate, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Lily, his on-again off-again girlfriend, wanting to know if he was still taking her to prom. Taylor didn't respond. He liked keeping her waiting, knowing that as quarterback, he could take any girl in school. "Hey Taylor, you ready for the history test?" asked a girl passing by their table, hopeful for a moment of attention. "Test?" Taylor frowned, then shrugged. "Doesn't matter. Harris will pass me anyway." It wasn't an empty boast. Mr. Harris, the history teacher, was also the assistant coach. He knew where his loyalties needed to lie. Taylor hadn't actually passed a history test legitimately since freshman year. After lunch, Taylor skipped his English class to hang out behind the gym. His latest report card showed a C+, which his father called embarrassing, but the teachers knew better than to give him anything lower. The school needed his father's donations, and everyone understood the unspoken arrangement. "The party at your place was sick this weekend," said his friend Drew, lighting up a cigarette. "Your parents really don't care." "They were in Europe," Taylor replied, taking a drag when offered. "Dad's buying some company or something. They won't be back until next week." The truth was more complicated. Taylor's parents were rarely home, his father consumed by business and his mother by social obligations. The huge house he bragged about was mostly empty, with hired help that changed too frequently for him to bother learning their names. Not that he'd admit any of this to his friends. As the final bell rang, Taylor made his way to football practice, high-fiving admirers in the hallway. Nobody noticed how his smile never quite reached his eyes or how quickly his laugh cut off when he thought no one was looking. In the locker room, Taylor's mask slipped for just a moment as he stared at his reflection. Yesterday's game had been awful, 2 interceptions thrown, a fumble, and the first loss of the season. His father hadn't called. Coach had tried to be encouraging, but Taylor had seen the disappointment. He needed to prove himself again. And when Taylor Green needed to feel powerful, someone else always paid the price. Monday mornings were always the busiest for Mr. Wilson. Weekend events left their mark on the school, spilled soda under the bleachers from Saturday's game, paper towels overflowing in the bathroom, and mysterious sticky spots on the cafeteria floor. He didn't mind, though. The work kept his hands busy while his mind wandered. He was mopping up a small coffee spill near the science labs when he heard them coming, the unmistakable sound of Taylor Green and his friends, their voices echoing down the empty hallway. Classes had started 5 minutes ago, but rules like be on time didn't apply to Taylor. Mr. Wilson kept his head down, focusing on the coffee stain. 15 years of experience had taught him that invisibility was sometimes the best strategy. He'd seen how Taylor treated people who got in his way. "Man, Coach Parker was all over me this morning," Taylor was saying, his voice tight with anger. "Like it's my fault the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed on Friday." "You threw those interceptions, though," said a quieter voice, Robbie, who occasionally showed glimpses of backbone before inevitably folding. "Shut up, man." The receivers ran the wrong routes. Mr. Wilson could hear the frustration in Taylor's voice. The loss on Friday had been bad, the team's first defeat of the season, and against their biggest rivals. The janitor had been cleaning up after the game, hearing the coach's worried conversations about college scouts who'd been in the stands. He was almost finished with the spill when Taylor's group rounded the corner. 4 boys in expensive clothes, walking like they owned the place. Mr. Wilson moved his cart to the side of the hallway to let them pass. But Taylor had spotted him. The boy's eyes narrowed, searching for an outlet for his anger. Mr. Wilson recognized that look. He'd seen it often enough in his military days. Someone looking to prove their power by showing how easily they could hurt others. "Well, look who it is," Taylor said, stopping in front of the janitor. "Working hard or hardly working, old man?" Mr. Wilson nodded politely. "Morning, boys. Shouldn't you be in class?" It was the wrong thing to say. Taylor's face flushed red. "You telling me what to do now?" He stepped closer. "You get paid to clean toilets, not give advice." Mr. Wilson said nothing, just reached for his mop to continue working. But Taylor wasn't finished. With a deliberate motion, he kicked over the bucket of soapy water. It crashed onto its side, sending dirty water spreading across the freshly mopped floor and splashing onto Mr. Wilson's pants and shoes. "Oops," Taylor said with exaggerated innocence. "Looks like you missed a spot." His friends burst into laughter, too loud in the empty hallway. Mr. Wilson stood perfectly still, looking down at the spreading puddle. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but something deeper and more thoughtful, as if he were looking at Taylor from a great distance. "Better clean that up," Taylor said, taking out his phone. "Here, I'll help you remember how it's done." He began filming as Mr. Wilson slowly bent down to right the bucket. "This is how you mop a floor," Taylor narrated for his video, putting on an exaggerated accent that mocked the way Mr. Wilson spoke. "First, you gotta pick up your bucket like this. Come on, show the people how it's done." Water had soaked through Mr. Wilson's work pants. He said nothing, just righted the bucket and reached for his mop again. "What's wrong?" "Cat got your tongue." Taylor moved closer, still filming. "Maybe you don't understand English too good." He followed this with a crude imitation of what he thought was a foreign accent. "Hey, what's your story anyway, janitor man? Failed at real life so you came to clean up after kids." Taylor's friends snickered, emboldened by his cruelty. "My dad says people who end up doing your job are just too lazy to get an education." Through it all, Mr. Wilson remained silent, his movements deliberate and dignified as he began cleaning up the mess. His face betrayed no emotion, but anyone looking closely might have noticed how straight he held his back, how precisely he moved, not the movements of someone broken, but of someone who had faced far worse than a high school bully. What nobody noticed was Wendy Lynn, the quiet editor of the school paper, standing frozen at the end of the hallway, a phone held up, recording the entire incident. Wendy Lynn hurried to the school newspaper office, her heart pounding against her ribs. What she had just witnessed made her stomach turn. She wasn't usually the type to get involved. She preferred observing life from behind her camera lens or computer screen. But this time was different. The newspaper office was empty except for her faculty advisor, Mr. Thompson, who was grading papers at his desk. "You're late, Wendy," he said without looking up. "We need to finalize the layout for Friday's edition." "Sorry, Mr. Thompson, but I need to show you something." Her voice shook slightly as she pulled out her phone. Mr. Thompson pushed his glasses up and watched the video. His expression darkened with every passing second. "This happened just now?" he asked quietly when the video ended. Wendy nodded. I was heading to the bathroom when I saw them. I didn't know what to do, so I just recorded it. You did the right thing. Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, thinking. The question is, what do we do now? Wendy bit her lip. I want to write a story about it. Mr. Thompson hesitated. Taylor's father is on the school board. Last year, a teacher tried to report his behavior and suddenly found herself reassigned to another district. So we just let him get away with it, Wendy asked. I didn't say that. Mr. Thompson tapped his pen against his desk. But we need to be smart about this. A simple story about bullying won't be enough. We need context. Something clicked in Wendy's mind. What do we actually know about Mr. Wilson? He's been here forever, but nobody really knows him. That's good journalism thinking, Mr. Thompson smiled. Find out who he is. That's your assignment for today. The layout can wait. Wendy spent her lunch period in the school's administrative office, where Mrs. Patel, who had been teaching math at Westlake for 20 years, was helping with paperwork. Mr. Wilson. Mrs. Patel looked up from the filing cabinet. Why the sudden interest? Just working on a feature about school staff, Wendy said, the half-truth coming easily. Well, I don't know much about his personal life. He's very private. Mrs. Patel closed the drawer. But I remember when he first started. The principal mentioned he was overqualified, but he needed a stable job with good health insurance because of his wife's condition. Overqualified? Wendy's journalistic instincts perked up. All I know is he has some type of engineering degree. Oh, and he was in the military. Mrs. Patel glanced at the clock. Sorry, I need to get back to class. Wendy headed to the library next. The school yearbooks going back decades were archived there. She pulled volumes from 15 years ago and began searching. In the 2010 yearbook, she found a small photo of Mr. Wilson in the staff section. The caption read, New hire Gerald Wilson joins the maintenance staff. He looked younger, but had the same dignified posture. Wendy went to the library computer and searched public records. It took some digging, but eventually she found an article from a local newspaper dated 2009. Local hero returns home. The picture showed a younger Mr. Wilson in military dress uniform receiving an award. She read quickly, her excitement growing with each sentence. According to the article, Captain Gerald Wilson had served 3 tours overseas. He'd received multiple commendations for bravery, including 2 Purple Hearts. Before joining the military, he had graduated with honors from State University with a master's degree in structural engineering. The article explained that he had turned down a prestigious job offer to return to his hometown because his wife had been diagnosed with a serious illness, and he wanted her to be near family support. No way, Wendy whispered, printing the article. She spent the rest of the afternoon tracking down more information. By the final bell, she had assembled an impressive file. Mr. Wilson wasn't just a janitor, he was a decorated veteran, a brilliant engineer, and a man who had sacrificed a lucrative career to care for his family. As students streamed out of the building, Wendy spotted Mr. Wilson quietly mopping the hallway, same as always. She watched him for a moment, seeing him with new eyes. How many times has she walked past him without a second thought? How many times had they all treated him as if he were invisible? Back in the newspaper office, Wendy began typing furiously. The story was taking shape in her mind, not just about one incident of bullying, but about respect, about seeing people for who they really are, about the dangers of judging someone based on their job. Mr. Thompson, she called to her advisor, who was gathering his things to leave. I think I've got something important here. Really important. Little did she know just how much impact her story would have, or how quickly Taylor Greene's world was about to change. By Wednesday morning, the school was buzzing. Wendy had worked late into Tuesday night, carefully crafting her article for the school newspaper's website. Mr. Thompson had helped her edit it, making sure every fact was checked and verified. They titled it simply, The Man Behind the Mop, The Extraordinary Life of Gerald Wilson. Taylor was strutting down the main hallway when he first noticed something was off. A group of freshmen stopped talking when he walked by, then huddled closer together, whispering. He shrugged it off, probably just intimidated by his presence. But then his teammate Doug looked up from his phone as Taylor approached their usual spot by the lockers, and Taylor could have sworn he saw something like disappointment in Doug's eyes. "What's up?" Taylor asked, punching Doug's shoulder lightly. Doug just shook his head and handed over his phone. "You messed up, man. Really messed up this time." Taylor looked at the screen and felt his stomach drop. It was a school newspaper article with a picture of Mr. Wilson in military uniform. Below that was another picture. A screenshot from Taylor's own video, showing him mocking the janitor while dirty water spread across the floor. What the Taylor started reading, his face growing hotter with each paragraph. The article detailed Mr. Wilson's impressive military career. Captain Gerald Wilson, decorated twice with Purple Hearts. It described his academic achievements. A master's degree in engineering with honors, job offers from top firms. And it explained his choice to take a janitorial position at Westlake High to secure stable health insurance when his wife was diagnosed with a rare illness. "Did you know he helped design bridges in 3 countries?" Doug asked quietly. "My dad's an engineer." He says Wilson's thesis is still used as a reference at State University. Taylor kept scrolling, his throat tightening. Near the end of the article was the video link with a simple caption, "Captain Wilson facing another kind of battle at Westlake High." "This can't be real," Taylor muttered, but he knew it was. He'd never bothered to learn anything about the janitor. Why would he? Janitors weren't important people, at least that's what he'd always thought. Throughout the day, Taylor noticed the changes. Teachers who normally joked with him now gave him cold stares. Students who usually clamored for his attention suddenly had somewhere else to be. At lunch, he found himself sitting only with Robbie, while the rest of their usual table was conspicuously empty. "It'll blow over," Robbie said unconvincingly. "Everything does." But Taylor wasn't so sure. During 5th period, his phone buzzed with a text from Coach Parker. "My office. 3 p.m. No excuses." As he walked to 6th period, he overheard 2 senior girls talking. "My dad's a veteran too," one was saying. "He was so angry when I showed him that video, said it made him sick." "My mom called the school board this morning," replied the other. "She said if they don't do something, she's going to the superintendent." By the time Taylor reached Coach Parker's office after school, the video had spread beyond the school website. Someone had shared it to several social media platforms, where it was racking up views and outraged comments. Coach Parker didn't invite him to sit down. "I've been defending you for 2 years," Coach said, his voice eerily calm. "Every time you acted out, every time you disrespected a teacher, every time you bullied another student, I said you were just young. That you'd grow out of it." Taylor started to speak, but Coach held up his hand. "I'm not finished. This morning, I got calls from 3 college recruiters. They all asked the same question: is this the kind of character we're developing at Westlake? Is this who we want representing our program?" Taylor felt cold. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that I've failed as your coach, because clearly I've taught you nothing about respect." Coach Parker slid a jersey across the desk. "You're suspended from the team indefinitely." "You can't do that. The championship is in 3 weeks. "Actually, I can, and your father can't change it this time." Coach pointed at his door. "Principal Rivera is expecting you in his office now, and Taylor, he's already spoken with your parents." As Taylor trudged toward the principal's office, he passed Mr. Wilson, who was quietly replacing light bulbs in the hallway. Their eyes met briefly. There was no anger in the older man's gaze, no triumph or satisfaction, just a calm dignity that made Taylor look away first. For the first time in his life, Taylor Green felt truly small. Taylor sat alone in his bedroom, staring at his phone. Another text from Robbie: "Everyone's meeting at Pete's house tonight. You coming?" Taylor didn't bother answering. He knew what would happen if he showed up: awkward silences, sideways glances, whispered comments when he went to the bathroom. He tossed his phone onto his bed and walked to the window. 3 days had passed since his meeting with Principal Rivera. 3 days of suspended classes, confined to home, while the school board decided his fate. His parents had hardly spoken to him since they were called into the principal's office. Dinner that night had been particularly tense. His father, usually so quick to defend him, had watched the video in silence, then looked at Taylor with something he'd never seen before: disappointment mixed with shame. "I've made excuses for you," his father had said finally. "I've thrown around my influence to protect you. I thought I was helping, but look what you've become." His mother had been even worse, tears streaming down her face as she asked, "How could you speak to another human being that way? Is that how we raised you?" Taylor had no answer. The truth was, he'd never thought of Mr. Wilson as a real person with a life and a history. He was just the janitor. Someone who existed in the background, someone whose feelings didn't matter. Now, Taylor couldn't stop thinking about him. About the man who had designed bridges but pushed a mop to pay for his wife's medical care. About the decorated soldier who had endured Taylor's mockery with quiet dignity. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Lily. "We need to talk." "I can't be with someone who acts like that." Taylor turned his phone off. Another relationship destroyed by his own stupidity. The next morning, his mother knocked on his bedroom door. "The school board has reached a decision," she said. "You're expected at school tomorrow morning for a meeting with the disciplinary committee. And Taylor, you need to find a way to make this right." Taylor barely slept that night. In his dreams, he kept seeing Mr. Wilson's eyes. Not angry, not hateful, just seeing him. Really seeing him, maybe for the first time. When he arrived at school the next morning, students parted in the hallways to let him pass, like he had some kind of disease they might catch. He kept his head down, making his way to the administrative offices where the committee was waiting. The meeting was brief and to the point. Taylor was suspended for 2 weeks. He would be removed from the football team for the remainder of the season. He would complete 40 hours of community service, and he would write a formal apology to Mr. Wilson. "Do you understand the seriousness of your actions?" asked Ms. Winters, the head of the committee. Taylor nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Words have power, young man," she continued. "The way you speak to people matters. The way you treat people matters." She leaned forward. "And just so we're clear, your father's influence had no bearing on our decision. In fact, he specifically asked that you face the full consequences of your behavior." That surprised Taylor. His father had always bailed him out before. After the meeting, Taylor wandered the empty halls, everyone else in class. He found himself near the janitor's closet, where a mop and bucket stood outside the door. Without thinking, he knocked. Mr. Wilson opened the door, surprise briefly crossing his face when he saw Taylor. "Can I talk to you?" Taylor asked, his voice sounding strange in his own ears. Mr. Wilson studied him for a moment, then nodded and stepped back to let him in. The small room was surprisingly neat, with cleaning supplies carefully organized on shelves. A small desk in the corner held a framed photo of a smiling woman, Mrs. Wilson, Taylor guessed, and what looked like military medals in a shadow box. "I'm sorry," Taylor blurted out, the words feeling inadequate even as he said them. "What I did, what I said, it was wrong." Mr. Wilson didn't respond immediately. He seemed to be weighing Taylor's words, searching his face for sincerity. "I know you probably hate me," Taylor continued, looking at the floor. "You have every right to." "I don't hate you, son," Mr. Wilson finally said, his voice quiet but firm. "Hate is a heavy burden to carry. I've seen what it does to people." Taylor looked up, surprised. "Then what? You forgive me just like that?" Mr. Wilson's expression was thoughtful. Forgiveness and trust are different things. One is given freely, the other must be earned. He nodded toward the door. "The question is, what are you going to do now? An apology is just words. It's your actions that will show who you really are." 6 months later, Mr. Wilson pulled his truck into the community center parking lot. Saturday morning sunshine glinted off the old vehicle's faded paint. He grabbed his toolbox from the passenger seat and headed inside, nodding to the receptionist who waved him through with a smile. "Morning, Mr. Wilson. The kids are already here." In the main activity room, a group of veterans, some missing limbs, others bearing less visible scars, sat in a circle with teenagers from Westlake High. Among them was Taylor, no longer wearing his expensive Letterman jacket, but a simple t-shirt with the Veterans Support Program logo. "Mr. Wilson's here," Taylor announced, standing up to help carry the toolbox. "We can get started on the boathouses now." The program had been Mr. Wilson's creation years ago, a place where troubled teens could work alongside veterans, learning skills while the veterans found purpose in mentoring young people. He'd been running it quietly on weekends, never mentioning it at school. Taylor set the toolbox on the workbench. "I printed the new designs last night," he said, spreading out some papers. "Think they'll work?" Mr. Wilson examined the drawings with a practiced eye. "Good work. You're getting better at the structural elements." The past 6 months had transformed Taylor in ways no one at school could have predicted. After their conversation in the janitor's closet, Mr. Wilson had made a surprising offer. Instead of generic community service, Taylor could help with the Veterans Program. "These men and women have seen the worst of humanity," Mr. Wilson had explained, "and they've found ways to come back from it. Maybe you can learn something from them." Taylor had agreed, mostly to get his punishment over with. The first Saturday had been awkward. The veterans knew his story, knew what he'd done. They weren't impressed by his family name or his football stats. "You think you're tough?" An older veteran named Phil had challenged him. "Try losing your legs in a war zone, then spending 2 years learning to walk again with prosthetics." By the third week, something had changed. Taylor found himself actually listening to their stories, really hearing them. He learned about sacrifice, about brotherhood, about facing consequences. Most importantly, he learned about respect, not the fear-based deference he demanded at school, but genuine respect built on actions and character. Today, as the group started building birdhouses for a children's hospital garden, Taylor moved confidently among the veterans, helping where needed, listening more than talking. His 40 required hours had ended months ago, but he kept coming back every Saturday. "Hey kid, hand me that sander," called Phil, who had become Taylor's unlikely mentor. As Taylor helped Phil smooth the edges of the wood, he glanced over at Mr. Wilson, who was teaching 2 younger teens how to measure and cut precisely. The difference between the janitor here and at school was striking. Here, everyone recognized his expertise, his leadership. They saw the man, not just the job. During lunch break, Wendy showed up with her camera. The school newspaper was doing a follow-up story on the Veterans Program, which had grown significantly since her first article about Mr. Wilson went viral locally. "How's it going, Taylor?" she asked, snapping photos of the half-finished birdhouses. "Good," he replied, no longer the arrogant boy who would have ignored her 6 months ago. "Mr. Wilson says we might get funding for the summer workshop if your article generates interest." Wendy nodded, looking thoughtful. "You know, when I wrote that first story, I never expected this." She gestured at him working comfortably alongside the veterans. Taylor understood what she meant. No one had expected this version of him to emerge, least of all himself. Later that afternoon, as they were cleaning up, Mr. Wilson pulled Taylor aside. "Got a letter from State University today," he said, handing Taylor an envelope. "The engineering department was impressed with your bridge design." Taylor stared at the envelope. After losing his spot on the football team, he'd had to reconsider his future. With Mr. Wilson's encouragement, he'd discovered an interest in engineering, something his football-obsessed father had never noticed or encouraged. "Think I have a shot?" Taylor asked, suddenly unsure. "They wouldn't have written if you didn't," Mr. Wilson replied. "You've got a good mind when you use it for something besides causing trouble." As they walked to their vehicles, Taylor stopped by Mr. Wilson's truck. "I never really thanked you," he said awkwardly. "You could have just let them punish me and been done with it." Mr. Wilson looked at him steadily. "The easy path isn't always the right one. Sometimes people need a chance to become better than their worst mistake." Taylor nodded, understanding now what Mr. Wilson had meant months ago about actions speaking louder than words. He hadn't just served his punishment, he'd found a purpose, a direction, and perhaps most importantly, genuine respect for others and eventually for himself. As they drove away from the community center, no one watching would have guessed that their unlikely friendship had begun with an act of cruelty in a high school hallway. They had both moved beyond that moment, not by forgetting it, but by transforming it into something neither could have imagined.